Good morning, family. Welcome back to the show. My name is Trey, getting in touch with you from Japan. And on this series, we're looking at how we took $200 and grew it into $1 million. In episode 2, we talked about how to get the ball rolling and how important it is to keep costs down so that you can get to profitability quicker. We also talked about how having some momentum is infinitely better than having zero momentum. And I also shared about over the last couple of episodes how my own demands on myself to make the next Facebook or Google or Microsoft or something like that were like so extreme that they were paralyzing me from starting something. So in today's video, we're gonna talk a little bit more about once you do start getting a little bit of traction, and actually even if you don't have any at all, having the flexibility to iterate and adjust and be flexible on the spot. One of the challenges I think a lot of people get caught up in is like, dude, I have to make a business plan, like a huge document that's like 100 pages and accounts for all the different potential like outcomes and challenges and, you know, competition and all these different things. But I'm kind of on the complete polar opposite of that way of doing things after going through what I've gone through. So basically, my stance is rather than figuring out like some huge dense business plan and wasting all of your time and focus and energy on that, is to run, go, give it a shot, and on the spot, be flexible to learn how to change. So we're gonna be talking a little bit about that in this episode and sharing from like real life examples from Japan Wi-Fi Buddy, like we have in the last couple of episodes as well. Growing up in middle school, high school, and eventually college, one of the really interesting dynamics I saw when I'd be like playing hardball, I'd be playing catch, throwing ideas around with my friends. We'd be like, oh dude, we should make this kind of business. We should make this kind of website. Oh, what if we changed this product and made it this way? It'd be better, you know? But then, you know, we'd be like, hey, yeah, let's actually give it a shot. But what would sometimes happen is that one of the people would be like, hey, don't steal my idea. I'm gonna become a millionaire doing that idea. Or somebody would be like, no, guys, like, just forget you heard about that. I'm gonna go and make this idea. But one of the things I've learned over the years is that actually having a new idea is like a very, very small part of the equation. Execution, doing it, starting it is like 95% of the equation. And that's the part of the equation that the vast majority of people will never actually do. So even though having the idea is important and necessary, being able to take the steps to figure out how to actually implement it or build it, and then presenting it in a way that's valuable and understandable to the target audience, and then being able to get feedback in a way that helps you iterate and improve and figure out, you know, pricing and marketing and all that stuff is actually like the meat and potatoes of the whole equation. You could think about the idea itself as like some wheat in a field of wheat. There are like huge, super huge fields of wheat all over the world, but you don't see people running up and taking a few pieces of that wheat and being like, dude, I'm going to build my own wheat empire and conquer the world. And that's just the way farming works, you know, like figuring out how to not only grow the wheat, get the seeds, fertilize the soil, harvest it in a timely manner, and then figuring out how to get that to processing plants and distributors who will then get it to like supermarkets or bakeries or restaurants. That's all part of the huge equation, you know? And yeah, the farmer just needs to figure out how to make good wheat, and the distributor just needs to figure out where to get good wheat and who to sell that to. So these are all different parts of the equation, but I think a lot of people get caught up in just the idea phase, and they're like, I have the greatest idea ever and I just have to keep this secret. I can't tell anybody. And therefore, oftentimes they just like never actually do anything. All that to say, if you do have a super brilliant idea, sometimes it's worth setting up non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, or setting up patents or copyrights or things like that. But in a lot of cases, you can't copyright like an app idea or things like that. So in the case of an app idea, figuring out how to execute and do it in the best way possible, that's just super slick and super easy to adopt and like super fun to use, is more important than spending all this time and money trying to figure out how to copyright it or make sure nobody else does that. So rather than wasting all your time figuring all the copywriting and patenting and all that stuff out, it's more important to get the ball rolling, to get some traction and to start iterating and start optimizing your ideas. So about 5 years ago, when we started to get Wi-Fi Buddy rolling, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my previous videos linked up here where I share more in depth on that. But yeah, we started out with 3 devices, and these devices, basically the contracts we had with the providers was they would provide 110 megabytes per day. So it was just like a little thing you stick in your pocket that's broadcasting a little Wi-Fi network, 110 megabytes per day. Granted, social media and like live streaming videos and stuff like that were way less important 5 years ago. And the majority of people coming to Japan to travel are just kind of like, I just need to text my family to make sure I'm safe, or here and there sending a picture to my brother, or using maps to be able to figure out where I'm going. These kinds of things were what most of the customers were using the Wi-Fi buddies for, so 110 megabytes a day was enough. And so we started out with 3, soon we had 6, and then 9, and then 15, and then 20, and more people were using the services, and they were getting a really good value because it would cost them, $35 or $50 or whatever it was for their trip. Then they could do all that they needed to do using the internet on their trip. And then we were able to set up a website. And then we figured out systems to figure out how to track the devices going around the country and make sure, people were satisfied with their data allowances and all that stuff. But once we started to get orders from people who we didn't already know for the first time, like, you saw that ring of like influence go from like friends and then like friends of friends. And then once we had a website, it was kind of like spreading out the internet through, word of mouth on Reddit or other forums or whatever. We started to get orders from other people, and some of these people didn't know what a megabyte was or what 110 megabytes is. They're just like, oh, I heard this is good, order, kind of thing. And so I needed to figure out how to start setting expectations correctly as well. So at the time, that was our only device on offer. And on the website, we made it clear, like, this device, the allowance on this device is suitable for 1 or maybe 2 light users if you're going to be doing some maps or some texting or things like that. And so starting out with that one product only, it was mentioned clearly on the website that you get 110 megabytes of LTE speed data. And then after that, for the rest of the day, if you exceed that limit, it slows down to 3G. But one of the things I learned is that not everybody reads everything on the website. And so people will come, especially people who don't have English as their first language, will come and make an order because they heard like Wi-Fi buddy's really good. Make an order. We had this group who came over, a group of 12 from somewhere in Asia. Obviously English wasn't their first language. They promptly got off the plane, connected all 12 of their phones to this poor Wi-Fi buddy, and zapped the LTE speed allowance like super quickly. And then they got throttled down to 3G for the rest of the day. They immediately email me and they're like, dude, you ripped us off, you screwed us. This is not LTE speed. And I'm checking the systems and I'm like, dude, you're at like 200 megabytes of consumption already. How many people are connected to the device? And they're like 12. I'm like, the website says to use it for 1 or 2 light users, maybe 2 light users. Like, why didn't you order 6 of them? And they're like, you ripped me off, give me my money back. So I learned a lot from that situation. Part of the problem was that they didn't read everything. Another part of the problem was that I didn't actually offer something suitable for that type of group. And then part of it, was learning how to manage upset customers and setting correct expectations in the first place. So for me growing up, I tend to be very kind of like sensitive and gentle, and I want to meet everybody's expectation and stuff like that. But I had a job working at Target in the customer service, like I was the manager of the customer service, and I was basically forced to deal with people screaming at me every day. And through that time, it's not like fun and awesome, like, yeah, I love getting screamed at every day at work kind of thing. But through that time, I learned how to stand firm on our company policies and our rules and things like that. And so in this situation, when this guy's like, dude, give me my money back, you ripped me off, I had to figure out, how to be gentle and supportive and understanding and provide a solution while at the same time standing firm on our terms of service or on our other rules that we had set up on the website. So that's a skill you're going to have to learn, is to have thick skin and learn how to deal with people yelling at you. And that's one of those things that you just learn and you adapt and you evolve over the years of people screaming at you. And you're basically not going to be able to avoid upsetting customers at one point or another. So after that blew over, I kind of had to sit down and be like, are we gonna start figuring out more generous data allowance options? 110 megabytes obviously isn't enough for some people, so what can we do, And so I started to look around, and the options were basically like, I would have to make contracts with providers for either 10 or 50 devices. And I'm like, dude, this might rapidly go from being like a very simple and kind of profitable little side business to being like the main thing, you know? And if I'm making contracts for 50 devices, my monthly expenses instantly could go from being like $100 or $200 up to like thousands and thousands of dollars. Am I willing to take this risk in this situation? Obviously, I was overwhelmed with the prospect of taking on a huge commitment, like a 2-year contract with a provider to spend, you know, 2, 3, 4 grand a month. When I look back on my journals from the time, it was clear, you know, and it ended up taking me months to make the decision. And by the way, if you don't keep a journal, please keep a journal. It's super dope and interesting looking back on how you've evolved and how your decision making has changed. But it's also quite neat to see like, oh dude, at that time in January of that year, I was like so pumped to be able to make $100. But by January the next year, I was like not even satisfied to make $10,000 a month kind of thing. You know, it's really interesting to see how your standards change. It's interesting to see the decision making. And then you can also go back and be like, oh dude, at that point, I decided to increase my inventory, but it ended up paying off really awesome. Or I increased my inventory and then it ended up screwing me later on, or things like that. You can really figure out how your business decisions have helped you. And at the same time, I think it's also super important to write down what you're thinking and feeling going through those times as well. I ended up going through a period in my life where I was just so busy, so overwhelmed that I didn't have any time to sit down and figure out how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. And I basically forgot how to like feel. You know, people be like, oh, you're really busy, you're working so hard, you must be really like, you know, worn out or things like that. And I'm just like, I don't know, I don't care, back to work kind of thing. And eventually I burnt out and I ended up in the hospital for weeks. So part of my recovery from that was to learn how to take a day off each week and also learn how to write what is going on in my head and in my heart. And the result of that has been healthier relationships. I think I can listen to and understand other people more because I can relate to them more. You know, like my wife or business partners or things like that can understand how I'm feeling more, you know, and that's really important to be able to move forward in a cohesive team. All that to say, keep a journal. So looking back on my journals from that period, I ended up eventually going with the expansion. And that was kind of around the same time like Netflix was taking off. A lot more people were streaming music or streaming YouTube while they're traveling and things like that. So there was a lot of need for our market to start offering more premium, more, you know, big scale data options. But the challenge that was going on in my mind was kind of like, dude, I've worked so hard all the way up until now, and I'm kind of pulling in a couple $100 free money every month because my side gig's working. Now, taking on this risk to go to the next step can make this into a full proper business, but it could also literally wipe me out. And as I mentioned in early episodes, every time you come to one of these steps, it's gonna be like, oh man, this is scary. Oh man, I don't know if we're gonna be able to do it. Oh man, like this is a huge risk. There's not gonna be a lot of decisions that you have to make where it's just like, yeah, no problem, we got this, it's gonna be fine. We're gonna grow to be $1 million business quickly kind of thing. Like, there's always gonna be challenges like every step of the way. So stepping up to that next step on the stairs is gonna be scary every time. And along with that comes potential growth and potential benefit and potential profit, but there's also risk. And it's gonna be scary every time, dude. And another thing to be aware of is that it could actually disappear at any time, you know? Like right after I put down that huge deposit on getting a bunch of new routers that are higher spec, could be that I got some super crazy lunatics leaving bad reviews all over the internet. Even if they were wrong reviews, false reviews, which happens sometimes, could be that it all goes away and basically I have to shut everything down and call up the data provider and be like, sorry guys, we're going out of business. We just have to break all the 30 contracts or whatever. So one of the things to prepare yourself for if you're getting into starting something new is that you kind of always have this fear in the back of your mind, like, yeah, today was good, but actually it could all go away. You know, and it could, like, you know, you're getting notifications on your phone like $100 order, $150 order, $100 order, like all throughout the day. And it's like, wow, today we made $5,000. This is pretty dope. But, oh dude, it could all go away at any time. Like, you're always gonna have that fear, I think. And I've heard from a lot of other small business, even large business owners who have that fear in their mind, you know? And so that's one of those mindset things that you need to be prepared for. And so going back to the Wi-Fi Buddy story, we ended up stepping up and offering a device that had 300 megs a day or a gig per rolling 3 days of data, which was significantly more. Later on, we offered plans with more and more data. And each time kind of the expense was higher and therefore the risk was higher. But one of the things I learned early on was that it's like, yeah, we got 10 new devices. These have bigger allowances. They cost more, but we can also charge a lot more for them. And you kind of got to take one step at a time and adapt and evolve as you go, you know? And if people are like, dude, I need more data, then you got to start thinking about offering more plans. You know, and if people are like, dude, your shipping is too slow, I arrive there in 5 hours, get it to my hotel for me by then you got to start figuring out, how can we get somebody who can be shipping for us in Tokyo or right next to the airport or something like that. And it depends a lot on what type of business you're doing. But stop for a second, take a step back and zoom out, and you got to ask yourself, before you start getting caught up in this, like, oh dude, I gotta get bigger. Oh dude, I gotta get better service. Oh dude, I gotta provide faster, blah, blah, blah. I gotta get more staff. I have better marketing, Instagram. You know, before you start doing all of that stuff, you gotta take a step back and say, what are my goals? Because if you don't have clearly set out goals, you're just gonna go mad and you're gonna get overwhelmed and you're gonna get super duper busy. And if your goals aren't clearly defined, you'll find the business becomes your boss. You'll find that things start to take over like every minute or every hour of your life. And when that happens, you lose your health, you can lose relationships, and you can also find yourself being like, dude, I have millions of dollars now, but actually my life is stupid because I like sleep 3 hours a day and I'm just like hustling. Like, what's the point of all of this? You know, whereas at the very beginning, if you were like, hey, once I reach X goal or A and B and C goal, then I can kind of wind down, or then I can sell the company or the project or the app, or then I can figure out how to outsource the rest of it, or things like that. So in our next episode, we're gonna get more into goals. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts and comments on this video, and looking forward to sharing more with you next week. Thank you guys very much. I love you and have a great one.